Geology, geology, geology. Welcome to mini geology program where we put in connection geology and society at large. And today we have the American Association of Petroleum Geologists, one of the largest association of geologists in the world, founded in 1917. So with us, the president, Mike Party, is joining us from Midland in Texas. We are in Houston, and so just on the other side of the state. How do you feel? How's it going, Mike?
Well, it's going good, all things considered. The virus is kind of problematic and got people down a little bit, but outside of that, healthy and doing good.
And talking about the virus, how is the geological community that you are leading, how is reacting to the coronavirus pandemic?
Well, what we're seeing happening there in the geological community, we have a lot of workshops and conventions and conferences, as you know, that have been canceled. We had a conference scheduled in the Middle East, Geo 2020, that would have happened in March. It's been delayed till the fall. The AAPG ACE convention was scheduled for the 1st of June, and we postponed it. We're still working on dates to get that squared away. The Offshore Technology Conference scheduled for June in Houston has also been canceled for the year. So we're seeing a lot of cancellations, but the geological community is stepping up, and we're doing a lot of webinars. I was just on one today. The bad part of the virus is it's also hit at a time when we had an oversupply of oil, so it's plunged the oil industry into a pretty stressed time with prices going way down, and we saw some paper barrels trade the other day for negative numbers, but it'll all come back, and at some point we'll get through it all, and we'll be all back out walking around and get life back to somewhat normalcy.
Are you worried?
About the industry, about the virus?
About the members that you represent.
I am worried about the members I represent. I'm really worried about a lot of the younger members. The problem is as we transition, we have things. I went through the 80s downturn, and in that time, we weren't dealing with a global recession. And we're going to see unemployment numbers between 15 to 20%. And we have a lot of young people coming out of universities and colleges that worked real hard to get to the point where they're ready to graduate, thinking about moving on to a job and everything like that. It's going to be a tough market.
Do you think that 15, 20% of the general population, or
yes,
specifically of petroleum geologists or geologists at large?
No, the overall U.S. population.
What do you think about geologists? Are they going to be hit heavier?
They'll probably be hit heavier just because we have two things going on with the downturn in prices and stuff. We're going to have to work through the storage issue. We have a lot of oil in storage. So my heart really goes out to the young people that you're coming out, you're wanting to start your life, and you got a lot of plans and just ready to get after it in your life. And then you're getting hit with both sides of this to where, the oil industry's down, the economy's down, and we're having to be locked in. So we're being locked in. But that's what AAPG is trying to do, is put content out there so people can go and in these times we're locked in our houses, we can do virtual classrooms and stuff like that and go out to the web and keep learning. And so expand our minds and keep our minds occupied. And I always say, don't worry about the things you can't change. Worry about the things you can do. So there's nothing we can do about the coronavirus. We got to work through it. We got to do what people are telling us to do to stay safe. But on the other side of that, while we're spending time in our houses and stuff and in lockdowns, we can be reading books, going online and finding videos about geology and looking at geology of a national park, looking at geology of another basin, reading about the Macaberta down in Argentina and development. So we can be expanding our minds and learning and keeping ourselves occupied and doing something very constructive.
Mike, you just mentioned a motto, but I have here another of your mottos. That is, if it is going to be, it's going to be up to me.
Yes.
Right?
Yep. That's what I say. If it's going to be, it's up to me. And that's one of the things that I think is kind of a little saying I've lived with most of my life. And and basically it comes back from growing up. I grew up on a pig farm. I mean, I came from an area, my mom and dad were factory workers, and they could barely afford to send me to college. And so you always have to take the initiative in your life. You can't depend on somebody else to do it. It's important to you, and if it's going to be, it's up to me, and you got to take a hold of it and make it happen.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in central Missouri. I grew up in a very small farming town. I actually graduated high school with 42 kids, and most of us went to school our whole lives together. And like I said, I grew up on a small farm. My dad raised pigs, and both of them were factory workers. And I graduated from University of Missouri Rolla, now the Missouri Science and Technology. I graduated there in '78. And I got a paying job of about $17,000 a year, my first job, and that was more, almost twice what my parents made together.
You mentioned to keep up the reading, and in fact, I was reading the AAPG website and the Explorer, which is the main magazine of the American Association of Petroleum Geologists. I read something interesting written in the month of March by David Brown. It's an article about hydraulic fracturing on the Explorer, and it was mentioning the Senate and the House bill proposing to ban hydraulic fracturing by 2025. What do you think about this very delicate topic about banning hydraulic fracturing?
Well, and I don't want to get off into a political debate on it, but one of the things that happens with fracking, hydraulic fracking, is it's opened up the shale revolution. And what's going to happen is when people realize what's going to happen with gasoline prices, energy prices and stuff, if you ban hydraulic fracturing, if you look back, we were making about 5 million barrels a day prior to really taking off on fracking. So think of that in the context right now. We make 12 million a day. So we doubled that amount of production. So without that doubling of production, we would be paying probably $4.50 a gallon for gasoline right now. Your electricity bill would be going up, all your petrochemicals and all your other things. Your cell phone would cost you more because of the plastics and stuff in them. So the reality is we use a lot of hydrocarbons, and hydraulic fracturing have brought that about where we have an abundant supply. We actually have gone net negative on imports and exports. We actually export more than we import now by a small margin. So with that, that's helped out. And the realization is that if we ban fracking in the next 5 years, we are going to see a tremendous amount of inflation. We're going to see a tremendous amount of job loss in the oil industry itself. And then you'll see it elsewhere around the country when things start happening. So I think it's impractical that it'll be hard to get implemented and really do anything. And I don't know if any politician is going to have the will to really do that outside of a local politician.
Mike, if you will, is a little bit like what we're doing right now with the virus. So you have to balance and decide what is the priority, because what you are depicting right now is like a tremendous negative environment, right? Which is what we're living right now because of the virus. So don't you think that banning the hydrofracking would have a positive effect?
Well, yes, it would in the United States, but you got to realize right now, China and India are bringing a coal power plant online every day. And so the atmosphere is the world atmosphere, not one atmosphere. And yes, we can change the course in a country like the U.S. And we've actually got declining CO2 emissions, probably even more so now that we're shut down. Same way in Europe, we're seeing declining CO2 emissions. We have some things that we can do if people. Everything comes with a consequence. You look at biomass. One of the big things of biomass people talk about as being a good, clean source of energy. Well, we're destroying forests. We're basically going in, and you look at where they got big biomass deals. We're going in and we're destroying forests to get the wood to be able to do it. So we're tearing down wood, pelleting, put it into pellets, and burn it to make it. One of the things we've got that's really efficient right now on the plate is natural gas, and we get that by virtue of hydraulic fracking. And natural gas has a very low carbon footprint and can be very useful in making the transition. And I think what we all have to look at is when you sit there and you say that one industry or another industry is pro-green or anti-green, as geologists, we're pro-green. When you really sit down and think about it, we go out, we love to be out in nature. We like hiking. We like looking at the outcrops and things like that. And so, we've always been kind of a pro-green, but there's transitions you got to do. One of the things Scott Tinker does a presentation where we've got 1 billion people that don't even have the basic necessities of life that are out there in the world because they have no access to affordable energy. And they live very, very hard lives with cooking on stoves and dying of lung diseases, respiratory diseases and stuff. So there has to be a balance on everything. And I think one of the things right now, natural gas powered plants, if we could get China to convert to natural gas versus doing coal, we could drop it a lot. So I think we have to be pragmatic. We have to look at solutions. We have to transition. It's not going to happen overnight, but we need to start farming some type of transition. And AAPG is going to be working in that respect. A new thing that's been out there for a while that's getting some speed is CCUS, carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And with that, we're going to go in and capture carbon molecules at the smokestack out of the atmosphere and inject them down in reservoirs deep in the earth to lower CO2 levels. And that's one of the things that AAPG is going to actually have a conference on and try to lead the way, because if we can pull CO2 out of the atmosphere, that's got to be good for everybody. And so as geologists, we can lead and we can help this transition into a lower carbon world. But, some of the things we got to do have got to be practical.
Mike, when we talk, going back to that article in the Explorer and talking about the ban on hydraulic fracturing, is AAPG, is it mentioned during the debate? The politicians, they come to the association to ask what the association members think about, or there's no connection between the politics, the ideas that they are growing in Washington and the association?
Well, we used to have an office there called the GODC office, which was kind of our lobbying arm, if you want to call it that. What we found is if you're not ready to go to Washington, D.C. with a couple briefcases of money to be able to influence politicians, they don't really spend a lot of time talking to you. We do some white papers and we get involved with them a little bit, but we shut down the GODC office because a small group, even though we've got about 30,000 members, when you're talking about with the politicians and stuff like that, we get a few phone calls and stuff, but mostly they're looking for the people, the lobbying groups that have big monies behind them that can help shape that. And there's places out there like IPAA and other groups that are actually working on that front, but they don't actively come to us for a lot of information because we're not really on their radar screen, and we found that when we had the GODC. But we do offer insight to them when asked, and we do put insights out. I was on a phone call just the other day with a Texas representative out of Houston, discussing some possibilities for legislation in the U.S. House of Representatives.
Which kind of legislation?
Just things they could do to help out the oil and gas industry. They were looking for a perspective from. I have a small company, and so they were looking for the perspective of a small operator, the mom and pop type operator, how they could do it. Because there's a lot of things out there that benefit Exxon Mobil's and the bigger independent companies that really don't help the small mom and pop. I've got like 8 employees here, so we're not a big company where we have hundreds of employees. And so talking about things like, one of the things I think that has a little bit of merit is some of the tariffs that's been proposed. Just keeping, like right now, we got a lot of Saudi oil and a lot of Middle Eastern oil coming into the ports in Houston that are actually going in the pipelines and being pumped to Cushing to store. So we're using storage capacity in the United States to store oil from the Middle East at the expense of people working in the United States.
You were defending the oil and gas in unconventional. Does it mean that there are a lot of members of the AAPG that they work in the unconventional realm?
In Texas and the United States, a lot of them now, and we're about 30-40% international, about 60% domestic. But out of the 60% that are inside the U.S. borders, a lot of those are working in the unconventionals, whether it's up in the Marcellus for the gas, the Marcellus in Pennsylvania, Ohio for the gas, and then our West Texas, North Dakota with the Bakken, and then the Niobrara and the Rockies.
Are the unconventionals going to develop also outside North America?
Well, I think they will. We're seeing some like in Argentina and some other places like that. They're unique in their geology, so they're not everywhere. And so, from that standpoint, I think there's going to be areas where they are going to be developed. Uh, like Argentina is a really good example that they're working towards that right now, and some other areas. But we have a unique situation in the United States. We have the Permian Basin, which is almost like four basins sitting on itself. We have the two Wolfcamp zones, one in the Delaware and one in the Midland Basin, and then we have the Sprayberry in the Midland Basin and the Bone Spring in the Delaware Basin, and all those have multiple landing zones. So it is a unique basin in itself, and I don't know that that basin is going to be replicated anywhere around the world.
Where is right now that you have the finger on the pulse of industry? Where is the oil and gas industry moving towards? In this chaotic moment, do you see pointing towards specific activities?
No, I mean, right now, I think what you're seeing is everybody is trying to survive. You've got a lot of the public companies. You're seeing things I saw today where a couple other major companies have cut budgets significantly. So you're seeing companies go in and cut their drilling budgets, cut their personnel budgets and stuff like that. The smaller companies that are private equity based or small stock companies are trying to get to cash flow where they can service debt and stuff like that. We're going to see several bankruptcies occur with some of the smaller companies. We're going to see consolidation within the oil and gas industry. And I think the mantra right now in the industry is everybody's just kind of hunkering down, trying to survive.
And are we going to reemerge as we were before, or something extraordinary is going to happen and it's going to change the oil and gas industry?
Well, I think the extraordinary thing that's going to happen is that there's been a lot of money put into the shale plays in places like Midland and the Bakken and places like that, and that money is going to be hard to be able to really get a lot of reward out of that money, a lot of rate of return. So I think you're going to see capital move away from the industry. So that's going to make it harder for operators to have another shale revolution. You won't, in my opinion, as we go forward, because the capital won't be there as readily. You'll have people doing some stuff, but we're going to have a loss of capital. I mean, we had a lot of money come in the industry since about 2011, 2012 through private equity and other vehicles out there. And with that gone, it's going to make it harder for companies to drill. And now you're seeing all the private companies, all the big companies, even the Exxon, Chevrons, and Mobil, Exxon Mobil, Chevrons, all the big companies, Totals, and Equinor and Eni, and all those, they're having to go in and live within cash flow regimes, and credit's going to get harder. So with that, we're going to see less drilling, less activity.
I see. So probably re-emerging with less companies in absolute numbers, where the majors, they become bigger.
Yes. And we saw that in the 80s. In the 1980s, when oil prices dropped at about 84, 85, dropped dramatically, what did we see? We saw ExxonMobil merge. We saw Texaco, Getty merge. We saw a lot of these big companies merging into each other. And then ExxonMobil's went ahead and bought XTO and some others along the way. So, Arco Permian went and got merged in. I think they went into ExxonMobil also, but we saw Chevron do some mergers, and we saw a lot of that occurring in the 80s. And I think we'll see more of that as we get going through here in our time period we're looking at now. They'll merge some companies together.
So there will be less and less space for the smaller companies. But what about those people that the geologists, that they have their entrepreneurship character and they want to do something new? Where do you think they are going to go since there is not that much space now in the classic oil and gas business?
Well, I think and like I said earlier, my heart goes out to the younger generation coming just out of college and stuff. It's going to probably be harder for them to work into the space. Some of the people have been in the industry about 10 years. There's things you can do like consulting and going into an independent geologist. If you're someplace like Midland, you can go out and start generating a prospect and sell a prospect and make a little bit of money and make a good livelihood. You get lucky and you find a nice little play. You can make a really good living. But there's been a lot of people in Midland that have made really nice careers out of just being independents and consultants. And when things start coming back, you're going to find a lot of these companies are going to be understaffed, and they're going to need staff. And so sometimes they're going to go out and find that staffing through things like consultants and stuff. So they'll go in and hire consultants to come in and handle things like geosteering or some other things, or well site work, or help with maps. They'll hire consultants to do it versus bringing somebody on staff for 2 or 3 years and then having to let them go.
For how long oil is going to remain the dominant energy source of the planet?
Well, that's a good question. And I've seen analysis by a lot of the major companies, and a lot of people point out to 40 to 50, 20,040, 20,050, that we're going to see some of that where it's still going to be dominant, and then it will start tapering down. But if you look, you can go out to a lot of the major oil companies' websites, and under their sustainability tabs and some other places in there, they show projections of what they see as far as the oil and gas future and how it's going to play out.
So if we say around 15, 20 years, what are your thoughts on the future of the AAPG in this context of phasing out petroleum as the dominant energy source?
Well, I think that I'm more worried about just near-term things with AAPG than long-term things. Anytime you have less people getting in an industry, you're going to have less people that are going to join the professional side of it. Short-term, what I'm more concerned about in the next couple of years is we have a lot of things we do, like conventions and stuff like that. We're going to see, and we're seeing it right now, that a lot of the companies are pulling back support. Professional societies, whether it's SPE, AAPG, any of them, we're seeing less support from the companies because their stockholders really don't see that as a benefit. So those things worry me more, because if we lose the support of the companies within the industry, whether it be the engineering side or the geological side, it makes society life, something like AAPG and SPE, it makes it a lot harder. And when you have big events like AAPG's ACE convention, SPE's OTC convention, if you don't have people willing to come to these conventions and you start being all virtual and stuff like that, it's going to impact the cash flow into those organizations, which is going to impact what they can do.
So, in other words, you see that the oil and gas industry is importantly decreasing in size and importance in the society, right?
Right, and we're doing things better. I mean, we're drilling wells better. We need less geologists to handle wells and stuff like that. So it's a typical deal. When I was in college, uranium was the big deal to go into prior to the 70s, and we went out and found more uranium than we ever needed. And if you're a uranium geologist, you got let go. And we've done the same thing in oil and gas. We go out and we find a tremendous amount of supply. And so companies don't need to hire as many people. And we've had a fundamental change in the oil industry back in the 80s that occurred. And one of the things that keeps getting forget about is when we went to the commodities market in the early 80s, like 82, before that, all the major companies had big exploration groups to go out and look all over the world to find oil and gas, because they needed the feedstock for their refineries. There was no way to supply their refineries and their petrochemical industries without having their own feedstock. Well, in the early 80s, we bring along the commodities market. Well, now any company that wanted feedstock for the refinery could go to the commodities market and trade on the commodities market to get it. So we saw a big decrease in exploration groups within the 80s into all the major companies. A lot of them got out of exploration. They could buy reserves on Wall Street cheaper, and that's why we had all the mergers and stuff. So we had a fundamental change there, and we're probably looking at another fundamental change here. Technology has done wonders for everything, and even in our industry, we can make maps quicker. We can do a lot more analysis, machine learning and things like that, taking seismic and putting it in and playing out attributes out of that seismic that define everything from the Poisson ratios to the densities and everything like that is unbelievable. And all of that in itself takes less geologists to be able to do it, and takes more people that understand big data and things like that.
So yes, you see that in the future, the membership of the AAPG is gonna decrease, as well as all the other associations and societies related to geology.
Yes, and I think it's going to, and you're going to see it not only well, I don't know if I buy that completely, because some of the bigger societies that are not oil related may not fare as bad from that standpoint. But when you're talking about an industry where the geologists coming into the oil and gas industry, and AAPG and SPE and SEG are more about the oil industry, those are going to have some challenges ahead of them. But and the bottom line too is we're seeing surveys and stuff being done all the time. There are less and less geology students coming out of the universities. We're even seeing a case now where major universities used to offer geoscience degrees and stuff have dropped those programs. Tulsa, University of Tulsa, has dropped their geoscience program.
Why?
So because there's not enough demand out there for it. So when you go in and you don't have the demand, and they look at dropping these programs, and you have less geologists coming out of the universities, naturally, if your organization dependent on geologists, you're going to have less people, less members to go after.
Well, when I meet the youngsters, they really like the geological part that is associated with the environment more than with the petroleum system. And I was reading the 2019 annual report of the AAPG, and I found out that AAPG has no official position statement on the climate change. How do you explain that?
We do. We just put it out. So
When?
3 days ago.
Okay. So
We
is that the same statement that was worked out by the ad hoc committee that
no
proposed it? No, you change
no
it?
no. What we
I-
did is
Is
that
it easy to find in the website?
if you look, I don't know where it's at in the website yet, but if you look into this month's Explorer, there's an article that the statement is in there. And what we did, and here's the interesting part on the statement. We had a lot of members clamoring for a statement, and we went out and looked, and we had some of the corporate advisory board looking at a statement, and we went and took time and went and looked at all the statements by all the other groups that are similar to us. And we saw a wide variance. Now, when you start getting in the trade organizations where they have to cater to other companies doing business with them, some of those got a little bit more detailed and a little bit more in depth into what they were talking about. But what we found is that from a standpoint of doing it, yes, we believe in a lot of things going on, but there's science behind some of it, and a lot of it. I mean, it's not some of it, all of it. And it's just how you have to look at the science. But yes, we posted that out there. It's just gone out, and it's in this month's Explorer, and will be posted up on the website. And that's what our
So
members wanted.
in the annual report, I read this. I'm going to quote it so that you can help me understand which part has been changed. It says the AAPG recognizes the abundant and compelling evidence that human activities are a key factor in current climate change, as referenced in the collective authoritative statements of the Global National Academies of Science in the comprehensive analysis on climate science as presented by the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change.
Well, now, where you found that in our report?
Yes, it comes out from an ad hoc committee that proposed it.
Well, the problem is with that ad hoc committee was set up to go in and look at publishing articles on climate change and look at that. They did a statement, which they can do as a member, and we looked and vetted it. There's a lot of science behind it, and we have a lot of members. I was amazed the other day. I was reading an article about the blue hole in the Caymans, and I forgot the guy's name, the Virgin owner, that airlines owner. He went down there with a little crew, and they went down there like 130 feet down. They found stalactites, and they were going, "Oh my God, there's stalactites down here." That only means one thing: that sea level has been lower at one point. Yes, it was. Sea level was 400 meters lower 17 to 20,000 years ago, and we have massive sea level rise from about 20,000 years ago to about 8,000 years ago. It was massive, and you saw it coming up. Man was not around at that time. So that was all a natural phenomenon. Now, I don't disagree that man has a part in CO2. When you look at it, yes, man has a part in a lot of different ways. Agriculture, concrete is one of the biggest things that puts CO2 in the atmosphere. When we build a building, build concrete, we've got a big influx from that. Man's very footprint is a problem, because we put out CO2 just even when we breathe, and when we deforest, that's a problem. Agriculture is a problem. So yeah, to say that man doesn't have a footprint would be wrong. But how big is that footprint and what it amounts to? Because we know we've had events in the past where the ice sheets have retreated tremendously, have been retreating for the last 17,000 years. So I talked to some people in New York one time, and they were totally amazed that there was almost a kilometer of ice over New York about 20,000 years ago. You can see the striations from the glaciation in Central Park on the gneiss in the park. They didn't even know that. And so for 17,000 years, we've seen glaciers retreating, and that was all natural occurring stuff. But it would be hard pressed to say that man doesn't have a footprint when you look at all the different activities that man himself does. Not only the burning of hydrocarbons, but deforestation, agriculture, buildings, and just his very makeup does it.
Yes, we had guests related to the Great Blue Hole. You were mentioning Sir Richard Branson,
Yes.
And we had the scientific representatives of the scientific committee talking with Mini Geology as well. In specific, we have Andre Droxler from the Rice University. Can you find and read us the statement that you have on climate change in the AAPG website?
Well, I will direct you to, you can go to the AAPG website, to the Explorer, and read it there, because I don't have a copy right in front of me that I can read, but you can go there and read it yourself, and be able to do that. People can do that, or listening to the podcast can do it when we're done with this.
Yes. And this is in the last...
the May Explorer. Explorer. And we actually ran, if you look back in the April Explorer, we ran an article in there. We ran a survey of our members to find out what their thoughts were, and we did that, and that's in the April Explorer.
Okay, so we should find May.
May
Explorer.
It's just coming out right now, and it should be up on the website, and will be a little preface to it, and then a preamble to it, and then the statement itself. But it should be coming up.
Okay. Well, don't worry, Mike, because we are not live. So I'm looking for it. I'm here in explorer.aapg.org, and feature articles, geoscience programs. Where is the register now?
Are you in the May or the April?
I open explorer.aapg.org. So I think it's the last one, right? The very...
If it's been posted up, they're posting it up as we speak, and I don't know if they've got it fully posted up. You'd have to just look at the date, whether it's April or May.
So is in May or in April? What?
May. It's May.
May. Yeah. So do you see the page, explorer.aapg.org?
The laptop I'm at, I don't know if I can.
I'll just open another window. This is gonna stay on. Doesn't matter.
But we've got a statement coming out, and it can be read there. We have a lot of members that have a lot of different viewpoints on this, and as the officers of the organization, we're trying to take into account what they've got.
Do you see this one? Do you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the Explorer. This is important because we have a lot of members that are really interested in this. So I think that it would be important that it's something so fresh and out there, because I couldn't find it.
Yeah. It's after. I think this may be last month's right here.
So where do I go now?
Well, they just hadn't got it up yet, so just kind of watch. It'll be up here in the next couple of days.
Oh, so it's not up yet.
Yeah. Well, I thought it might be, but what you're showing me there looks like to be the April version.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna stop. Okay, we're back. All right. So just to be clear, the AAPG now has an official position statement on climate change. and it was discussed a few days ago. It is not online yet, and we're gonna wait for it. Can you tell us in few words what is the gist of the statement?
I would rather not try to paraphrase it. I'd just soon everybody
Yes.
read it, and that way they could make their own decisions. And like I said, I just don't have a copy of it here in front of me. That wasn't something I was prepared to talk very much
Okay.
detail about, and so I didn't print a copy of it out. We did that and got everything done and approved. I will be truthful with you. We were working on this. The last DC under President Denise Cox worked on it. They came up with one that they approved. That's where the ad hoc committee was. We took it up this year, worked through a survey of the membership, got the statement pretty well worked up with what we saw from the membership survey. But since February, when we were talking about it at a February meeting and getting everything online, ready to be posted, our whole world has been turned upside down from the coronavirus, and just trying to make sure that we don't get caught just letting money get away from not paying attention to the events we have out there. There's been a lot of events canceled, and that has really taken the EC's time. And I will tell you right now, with a lot of the geological organizations, that what's happening right now is really going to be taxing on them.
Mike, do you remember if the statement supports the Paris Agreement?
I do not. Let's let people read it and answer it. I'm not going to go in and start talking about it at this point. Members need to read it, and people need to read it and see what's there.
Okay.
The good thing about it is the U.S. Is one of the few places that actually met its Paris Accord, and they're not even part of the agreement.
So you are implying that AAPG is not part of the agreement?
No, I didn't say that. Well, we're not. I mean,
no, it's not part. I mean, if it support the agreement to reduce the increase of global temperature.
Yeah, you have to read it. We've got things in there. We've got language in there, and I'll let you all read it.
Okay, so it's not so clear as to say, yes, AAPG agrees with Paris Agreement. It's more complicated than that.
I'm going to let you read it, and I'm not going to say that. When you read it, you'll understand it and what we're talking about.
Okay. And then you were mentioning before that the APG is engaged in the energy transition. And so we were mentioning about the new generation that would like APG to embrace this energy transition, as well as the reduction in the CO2. So aren't you worried of not serving these members?
The members that think we should transition?
Yeah, and that they are really worried about the climate change topic, and that they would like AAPG to fully embrace the Paris Agreement.
Well, that's fine. I mean, you got to realize that AAPG is a big organization. We got roughly, I think, 30,000 members total when you count the students and stuff like that in there. We have a wide sector, and you got to remember one of the purposes of AAPG, is to promote the sciences as it pertains to petroleum, natural gas, and other subsurface fluids. So when we look at that, we can talk about the Paris Accord and stuff like that, but the bottom line is that a lot of our people work in the oil and gas industry, and we have membership there that we have to, we can't go in and take one side to the other. We can't go in and take all of our members that said, no, we don't believe in climate change at all. We think that there's other problems out there that are more important, and we can't go and take the other side and say we've got to be totally restrictive. We as a leadership have to make a balanced approach to what's going on that benefits all of our members, not just the far right or the far left, but the overall membership we have. And that's what we've tried to do with this approach. And I will tell you, I mean, it's one of those things that we are embracing the transition. Now, you can put things out there like you're going to abide by this code or this agreement or that agreement, but AAPG in its capacity that we're going in at this point and we're looking at transitions, and we're doing CCUS and other things like that to embrace those things and help with the transition and trying to do that. So from that standpoint, we're doing what we can, but keep in mind, we're a petroleum organization, and the vast majority of our memberships make their livelihood in the petroleum organization. And so we have to kind of embrace that. And I shouldn't say embrace it, but we have to go in and realize that fact as we make policies that affect our membership.
And I'm gonna turn on my video. I think that you don't see me anymore, right?
Right. Yeah, you just got a picture there.
Sorry. It says that my video has been disabled because I start screen sharing. So let's see if I can stop sharing. Oh, I was still sharing. Okay. Now let's see. Can you see me now?
Nope. No. Yeah, now I can.
All right. So, so are there members in the AAPG that they deny the climate change?
Well, I can't point and say there's members that deny it out there, but I mean, we know there's a lot of things that are happening out there, and you know, we've got people all over the country that have different opinions on this thing, and from our standpoint as a leadership, we have to respect the opinions of our membership, look to the science as best we can, and come up with a policy that fits what we see out there. And there's a lot of difference. And I'll tell you what, we deal with a lot of models in our business, and we do a lot of reserve models and stuff like that. And models, like they say, are as good as what goes into them. So there's a lot of issues out there. And like I said, I don't think you're going to find anybody within AAPG that disagrees with the overall context that man has a footprint. It's just, what is that footprint and to what effect? We definitely know that there's been a big natural deal towards global climate change. And we know it's happened throughout history, the geological history. At one time, the Earth was an ice ball. It was totally froze over. Back in the 70s, everybody said we were going into an ice age. And that was a big deal there. If you remember, Time and everybody ran articles that all the science said we were going into an ice age. So there's a lot of things out there we don't fully understand. And we go in as a group, we rely on peer-reviewed science. And that's what we were trying to do with the ad hoc committee, was look at peer-reviewed science and see what's out there. I don't care what the media says. I don't care what the talking heads say. I want to see the peer-reviewed science. And there's a lot of it out there. And
but the peer-reviewed science says that it is crystal clear, the relationship, right? What is the debate? So what is the...
Well, let me ask you this, just plain straightforward. 20,000 years ago, the glaciers started retreating, and they've been retreating ever since. Man didn't cause that. So when you go in and look at these models, people go in and look at the last 1,000 years. Well, things have been happening for 20,000 years to 1,000,000 years. And so the models aren't taking that in because we can't model that. So if you look at any sea level curve out there, there was a dramatic rise in sea level for about the first 10 to 15,000 years as we came out of glaciation. You look at CO2 curves, there's a lot of things we don't understand about those things. And I constantly try to read on it, and I don't have the answers. But I know a lot of the stuff that's put out there that's said to be peer reviewed is not peer reviewed. It's articles being put out by people that aren't in the geological realm. But there's a lot of it that is. And I go out as a person that wants to know the answers. I go out and read as much information as I can. I don't have the answer, and I'm not for sure a lot of people do. As an officer of the Arc Association, we're trying to melt those things together. Climate change is a big topic. And we're seeing the same thing occur with the coronavirus. We're seeing models that were run where they were talking about 1 million deaths, 2 million deaths. And I don't think anybody believes that's going to happen. But we run models with the best data we have, and we make conclusions, and then we draw references from that. But, you know.
So, Mike, when you but I read the annual report what the ad hoc committee proposed,
That ad
and
hoc committee was not charged with coming up with a statement. They were charged in bringing peer-reviewed data forward, and they did not do what they were charged with.
What do you disagree with those quotes? What is that you disagree with?
Well, I'm not going to get into breaking it down. I mean, I'm not wanting to get into a climate debate because my opinions don't matter what I think on the climate.
Well, I mean, no, I mean the association, because this is important because the members, and especially the young generation, they're really interested in which kind of association they are going to belong. So this is a very important topic that the members or the non-members, they would like to know. So the quote is like pretty simple and short.
Yeah.
So I would like to know if there is something that you disagree with. It says the AAPG recognizes the abundant and compelling evidence that human activities are a key factor in current climate change, as referenced in the collective authoritative statements of the Global National Academies of Science and the comprehensive analysis on climate science as presented by the IPCC.
On that deal there, that was not a sanctioned deal. I'm an officer of the association. We came up with a statement. People can read it on the line and see what's there. The problem with that statement, if you want to look at problems, that was like 7, 8 members out of 14,000 voting members. So I can get you 7 or 8 members that would say exactly the opposite of that. And you know, whether they're right or wrong, and we can debate whether they're right or wrong. That's why we came up with a statement. We put it out. Our members will debate that statement. They will make comments. That statement may get worked over down the road more, but it'll be put in front of the members. It doesn't matter what Mike Party says at this point. It's what our members think, and we're putting it out to our members to do it. We don't go in and, you know, we do not let people in a democracy let 10 or 20 people in a democracy dictate the democracy or dictate the organization. We got to go in and work through it, and that's what we're trying to do.
But don't you think that the leadership should show the way? We shouldn't vote on important issues like this one democratically. It's not that 51% of the voting members they have the final say. It should be the leadership that shows what are the implications of statements that are so important.
Yeah, you might want to look up what the definition of a dictator is in the dictionary, because that's where you're headed with that. When you have leadership that goes against the will of the people that they're representing, and that's a dictatorship. And we look at things differently and I personally do. I mean, I look at things differently that like I say, we're going to put it out. Our members will look at it and we'll make some adjustments to it. It's one of those things, you know, everything happens in steps. And so, you know, that's where we're at. The statement's out there. Everybody can read it. Everybody that's a member of AAPG or other people can make comments on it. And the membership going forward is going to take that into account.
Mike, yes, go ahead.
I was going to say, let's move on to another topic, because we could talk about global warming forever, and I don't have the answers.
My point was trying to be clear about what is the position of the association, not really talking about the climate change, but just deciding a clear statement so that the members or the non-members, they can understand which kind of association is AAPG.
That will be posted out there, and we definitely welcome comments and feedback and stuff on it, because we're looking to our membership. We look to our membership for guidance all the time and go from there.
How would you inspire the students and the young professionals to join the AAPG? Because the AAPG is funded on the volunteering, and you need new energy that comes from the youngsters. How do you inspire them? How do you would propose them to join the association?
Well, I mean, it's like any other organization. You join it, the camaraderie. You know, you do things, you sit there and you talk to peers that about experiences we have as when we went to college, when we go to outcrops. You're not going to go in, if you go in and you end up in a accounting organization sitting there talking about outcrops and stuff, it's not going to be as much fun as when you get around geologists. I mean, geologists is a really unique breed of people. We have a lot of love for the outdoors and the outcrop and looking at rocks and stuff like that. And so from that standpoint, we end up going in and I think that's the thing you have to bring to the table for the younger people, because geology, whether you go with AAPG or you join some other organization, just looking to get involved with a group of your peers in the geological community. If you're going to be in the geology community, it's fun. I've had basically a 40-year career in geology, and each day it's like putting a puzzle together. I look at a new set of data and make inferences on it. And in the oil and gas side of the industry, you get to prove those theories up that you do pretty readily. When you drill a well, you find out if you're right or wrong, or if you core, you find out if you're right or wrong. It's a challenging curriculum, a challenging career. And if you love the outdoors and you love geology, what better place to come to work than within a geological organization?
Mike Party, you president of the American Association of Petroleum Geologists. When and where do you meet the young generation? How do you empathize with them?
Well, as far as like the students and stuff coming out now, we have gone in. Last year, we did a student expo where we were trying to help students get jobs in Houston. We had about 300 students there. I went in and attended that conference and gave a couple talks there, interacted with the students there. Actually went in, the students that won the poster session, I personally bought them lunch at a luncheon so they could be rewarded for the hard work and effort they put forward. I constantly communicate back with my alma mater, and I do go travel. I was scheduled to do a lot of traveling to do student-oriented stuff this year, but the coronavirus kind of took effect of that.
I see. So, and what do you think about them? What do you think about this generation? Is it like very different from yours?
Yeah, they're a lot like us. The biggest difference I see with the younger generation, when I came out of school, guys didn't learn to type. The only people who learned to type were in high school, that you typed to be a secretary. Nowadays, we got kids coming out of school. The young people are coming out. They got unbelievable typing skills and stuff like that, and computer skills. We didn't have that. When I came out of college, we were just starting with Fortran and COBOL. Now we've got C+ and all these different languages out there. This generation coming out now is very technologically savvy. They understand it. They can work with it. My generation wasn't. We had to come up with speed along the way. Their intellectual ability is unbelievable, and so they've got a lot of talent going for them with the other stuff. It's a very impressive group of kids. I was in Buenos Aires earlier this year, and last year actually, and met with some of the students there, quite a few of them, and I'm totally impressed. The kids and the young students nowadays, they're prepared for the challenges ahead of them. They just need to be able to have those challenges. And with things like unemployment and the coronavirus, it's robbing them of the ability to get into that challenge.
How many junior or young people are among the members of the AAPG? Which percentage is roughly?
We have a lot. We have probably 300 or 400 YPs, but we've got 8,000-9,000 students.
Out of how many members exactly as AAPG?
We've got about 30,000 total members. 25, 30,000. Yeah. So probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 35% are students.
Is there an official number or about the memberships, the number of members?
It's usually we print a year-end number in the year-end report that's in the bulletin. I think it comes out in like the May or June version of the bulletin, but those are available within AAPG, and it's got all the membership statistics, just like every other organization has out there.
Oh, okay. So you have the demographics of the available. And what about the, you say nationalities? You have
60% U.S. and about 40% international.
International. And what about gender?
I don't have those numbers in front of me. One of the things is that we've seen a lot more females come into the geosciences versus through the STEM programs and stuff like that. So we're seeing an overall increase, but I don't have a breakdown. I'm looking here. I don't have a breakdown on our gender breakdown, but that's probably in that report.
And talking about the gender, it seems that the women have been recognized as AAPG awardees are very few. I think that there is a presentation by the Professor Christopher Jackson of Imperial College that he gave at AAPG, by the way, where he said that the percentage is 3%, 3% of female AAPG awardees in the last 72 years. And also he said that 5% of women, they were honored with the Distinguished Lecture Program, which is the oldest and most prestigious program of AAPG. Do you have what is your idea about this diversity or lack of diversity, at least in the awards?
Well, I'd have to go back and look at what the numbers he's talking about. And, when you have to look at these numbers and, how to kind of explain them is that we have to have people that are qualified for the awards. And I'm not saying that there's not females out there that are not qualified for the awards. And I'll show you the other side of the coin is if you look, we've had several, probably more than most organizations, female presidents. We have a situation this year where both candidates for president are female. And we've got Denise Cox 2 years ago was female. So we've had a pretty good run here in the last 10 years of people that females probably have been 40% of our presidents over the last 10 years. I'd have to look that number up. I'm talking off the top of my head, but we've had several female presidents. I look at the AAPG. I haven't noticed in my career, and maybe this is blinders on my part, but I hadn't seen anybody within the AAP judge people on gender. Women, this is an industry that is tough on women just because in the old days, they had to go out in the field. And I can't imagine a female geologist going out in the field in places like Argentina, South America, the Middle East and places like that, and being out there miles and miles away from everything. West Texas, driving out to a rig in the middle of the night. There's a lot of vulnerabilities there, and there's a lot of stories. And if you realize Robbie Greaves, who is a past president, put a deal out called Anomaly, talking about, I think it was the 100 most influential women in the AAPG. And you go through and look at those women there. Getting into the specifics on the awards, you'd have to go in and look at those things. And I don't have those numbers in front of me, and I'd have to go back and research that. But we have tried a lot lately in the last 10 years to make sure that we were looking at diversification. We have a lot of very strong females in the organization, and we're constantly looking towards them for leadership and guidance and stuff like that.
So do you mean that before, in the past, there was a bias against women?
No, there wasn't that many women in the industry. I mean, if you go back even like when I started in the 70s, there wasn't a lot of women that went into geology. The STEM program that they've done is unbelievable for what it's done to empower women to get into the sciences and stuff like that. The WTGS, the West Texas Geological Foundation, we've actually created an award, and that award actually rewards, we call it WINGS, Women in Geoscience. And we give $5,000 scholarships to a female recipient that's in the university studying geology. And, we're trying to do everything. And you see organizations all across the spectrum trying to go in and help empower the women and the ladies in our profession to get degrees and stuff. But when you go back and look, I mean, when you go back and look before STEM programs, there was a lack of people getting involved in the programs like that. And so from that standpoint, like I said, you have to kind of look at it from that context is how it came forward. And looking at specific numbers, I can't do that. I don't look at the demographics. I look at people, and I don't look at whether they're male.
So when you look at people, do you see which percentage of women around you when you act as a president of AAPG?
Yes. And I look.
I mean, no, I mean, what percentage of people are women? Like when you act as an AAPG president, is like 10%, 50%? What is the percentage of women?
Well, when I go to the meetings here in Midland, the different society meetings, I probably see it, just looking at it and thinking about it, probably 15 to 30% are women at the
That's,
meeting. So, and I mean, I've hired females in my office. I actually have basically my VP is a male, and then I got two geologists here. One's female and one's male. And so, I look at people and look at their abilities. When I go and try to form a committee, I don't go in and say, well, I want to see whether it's a male or female. I go out and see who the people are that get the job done and have the work. And we have a lot of highly qualified ladies in this industry that are stepping up. And like now, you can look at them leading. Look at the top oil and gas companies out there. A lot of the ladies leading these organizations are AAPG members. A lot of those ladies have not been engaged in the organization as much because they're heavily engaged in BP, and other companies like that. So you have to kind of look at that. I mean, they're not involved with AAPG because their jobs dictate that they're not going to be able to spend time doing a lot of things there. But these are very strong and resourceful and very knowledgeable, and that's why they're leading some of the top companies in the world.
do you think that associations like AAPG, they should create specific awards recognizing minorities and diversity?
We do. Just like I told you, like the Wings, we give out scholarships to young ladies.
So it's something that you support. That is,
Yes.
should the association do more, or you think that this is the right balance?
Well, I think what we do, we go out and we look to the candidates, and we typically don't have very many, like our Distinguished Service Award. It's not dedicated to one or two people, so we can actually give that to several people. You talk about diversity. Our slate this year, we've got two females running for president, a female running for vice president of regions. We have a female running for treasurer. So we have got 6 officer candidates out there, and out of the 6, 4 of them are female.
Yeah, but today the president is a male. The next president is also a man, Richard Fritz, and the executive committee is represented by 8 people, only one woman, one woman.
On this
Yes.
EC, and it wasn't because they weren't run as candidates. We had candidates in there for some of that, but then like next year, if you look at it, there's a good chance that we could end up having half of the executive committee be female. So,
all right.
So we have some stuff like that. All these things are things that you have to work through, and like I said, I don't see a gender bias in AAPG. And when I look to do committees, I look for the strongest people that are out there that have the talents and the ability to do it. I can't speak for everybody in the organization and everybody around the world, everybody doing everything, but we're in a situation that I think that we're trying within AAPG to empower everybody. I mean, just not along the gender lines.
Mike, thanks for being so open and talking about these hot topics about the AAPG. The members and also non-members are very interested in these topics, and I really appreciate that you are talking with us about this. I feel that you still want to say something to the viewers or listeners, and so you can take your time if you want to face the camera, and the mic is open, so you can communicate, shout out, pitch to members of the AAPG or the society at large.
Well, I just encourage everybody to, look at going in and we're going to be in some trying times here, and it doesn't matter what you do from the standpoint of careers. I just gave a talk on careers. We're going to see some pretty high unemployment numbers, and it's going to be a challenge whether you're a geologist, whether you're an engineer, whether you're working in a plant in Michigan. It's going to be challenging times. And I would just encourage everybody, if you're a member or not, everybody stay safe, everybody stay, to a point where you come to your happy place in life, because it's going to be some rough times. We probably none of us have seen it in our lifetime. The last time we had a pandemic of this nature was back 100 years ago, and I would imagine nobody listening to this podcast was around then. So we just got to bear through it. We got to come out the other side, do what you have to stay healthy, and I hope if you're considering being a member of AAPG that you'll consider us and become a member. We have a lot to offer, and it's an exciting field. And from that standpoint, I appreciate the time and go from there.
Thank you, Mike Party, the president of the American Association of Petroleum Geologists, one of the oldest association of geologists founded in 1917. Thank you so much. This was another episode of Mini Geology. You can find it at minigeology.com. You can write at minigeology@gmail.com, writing the questions for the next guest, as you have done for this guest. Thank you, the viewers and the listeners. And this is Daniel Minizini, your inquisitive geologist. Thank you. Thank you again, Mike Party.
Thank you.